This is the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. On today's program, we're going to deal with an extremely important situation, and that situation is the explosive growth of super censorship. I'm not talking about censorship here and there. I'm talking about what happens when a very powerful force takes over all form of communications in the United States and the world. For example, under total lockdown, all social media like Google, Facebook, and on and on and on, all the news channels, the cable channels, the entertainment stations, radio, TV, the film industry, the music industry, every form of communication is under total lockdown, and every form of communication has to meet the politically correct view or the official viewpoint, or it is censored, shut down, or removed permanently from places like the internet. That's a pretty scary thought, isn't it? It means you are not allowed to think any thought and to say anything that deviates from this all-powerful Big Brother Orwellian state with its thought police. And if you dare to deviate in your thinking, the officially approved thinking, then you will be removed and your voice will be silenced. That is what is going on right now as we speak. And at the rate it is going on, it is the single most dangerous threat for America and the world, because we now live in an age of computer technology and censorship. All-powerful censorship is very easy because you can monitor everything and everybody through computers and bots and stuff. Just think for a moment about the number of people, and maybe you're not aware of it. I mean, maybe you don't realize it's going on because it's very subtle. It's very powerful, but very subtle. But there are countless numbers of people with websites, blog sites, YouTube channels, social media, Facebook type sites. And many of them, especially when it comes to YouTube, which seems to be on the warpath today, are being censored. They're having their YouTube channels removed, or they're under the threat of having their YouTube channels removed. Or individuals posting YouTubes are having their YouTubes pulled down like crazy right now. See, nobody's reporting on it because the Big Brother mainstream media doesn't want you to know how all-comprehensive this is. So there's no mirror, there's no reflection. Nobody's telling you just how all-pervasive and threatening this thing is. Just how many YouTubes have been pulled down, or social media, Facebook accounts have been canceled, or posts that have disappeared into nowhere, where the technology is designed to fool you. You post your posts on Facebook, you assume it's out there, but in reality, it's rigged and it doesn't reach a whole lot of people. Not to mention the widespread practice of rigging numbers on all kinds of social media internet platforms. And this has been going on a long time, but in the past year, it has taken off, and it is accelerating so that you can go to somebody's YouTube channel, or you can look at a particular YouTube or whatever, or how many visits or views or reads or hits a particular internet source has on a particular article, YouTube, audio message, or whatever. And all of a sudden, you see the numbers are way down, and you make the false conclusion that, gee, there's not a whole lot of people listening to that anymore. There's not a whole lot of people watching those YouTubes anymore. I guess they're kind of like, they've become extinct. That's far from the truth. They haven't become extinct, but there are very, very powerful forces that want to create the illusion that nobody has interest in what they're saying or showing or whatever. So what they do is they manipulate artificially the numbers of hits and views and reads and watches and likes and things like that, or just the number of visitors. I see it all over the internet because I've been watching these numbers for years now. And messages and YouTubes, etc., that would not all that long ago would have generated an enormous interest, seem to be generating a smaller interest. And that's happening one of two ways. It's probably happening both ways. First of all, they're rigging the actual counting system. So it reduces the number of watches, views, approvals, thumbs up or whatever. And then secondly, they rig the search engine so that these YouTubes or articles or whatever, which used to be, because they were interesting, would be all over the internet. Now they're not there. So they rig the search engines to make it look like these things are not of interest. And what is the end game? What is the end game for all this? The end game is to totally control the flow of information on the net, in social media, totally control it, so that ultimately, and it's not that far off in the future, ultimately they can bring you to the place, and they can do it overnight if they chose to do it, where anything that goes against whatever the official propaganda point of view, anything that doesn't agree with the official fake news propaganda view, is erased from the internet. There are some very large organizations like InfoWars that have been threatened. I don't know where they are now, whether they have one or two warnings left, because YouTube didn't agree with the content of their videos, specifically the fact that InfoWars was reporting facts about this recent school shooting that are very disturbing facts that contradict the official story seen in the mainstream media. So the owners of YouTube and other powerful media organizations are threatening to pull the plug on them. Now, they'll still exist, but that reduces their outreach. But it's not just InfoWars. You may or may not like InfoWars, but that's not the point. That's not the point at all. If InfoWars is going to be censored and removed from the internet, and nobody speaks out against it, then it continues. And then eventually, things that you're more fond of or whatever will be censored from the internet. And then eventually after that, if not what's going on already, all Christian or biblical content that is truly biblical, truly Christian, and which is not politically correct, starts to be censored from the internet. And so the Word of God is removed from the internet. The gospel, all the Christian commentators, the Christian blog sites, the Christian YouTube sites. This is an enormous amount of communication power to spread the light of God's Word, to communicate a biblical worldview. And there are powerful forces that are itching to take that down. Let's take the issue is not gun control. That's just one out of an endless number of issues that powerful forces want to destroy. It's not just gun control. It just happens to be gun control right now. After it's gun control, it will be something else. And there's a reason for that. They want to dumb down the consciousness of the average American. They want to obliterate the mind from the minds of young people, especially because so many young people, especially the millennials, are raised in an educational system and in a media complex which has scrubbed truth from their mind and memories. They don't even know history, and therefore they're totally incapable of looking at the school shootings in the context of historical fact. And if you can't look at the school shootings in context with historical fact, you can't possibly have an intelligent perception about what's going on. You're simply moved by your emotions. You're simply a pawn who your emotions are manipulated. So people feel this and people feel that. But guess what? The world doesn't move according to your feelings. You have to have facts and logic and reason, because your feelings can deceive you. And the lesson of history is quite simple to everybody who has had an opportunity to study it, to read it, or review it. And there are many people in older generations who have had that opportunity. That's why they look at the gun control thing completely differently than the millennials who've been brainwashed. Anybody who knows history knows the basic facts regarding gun control, because there are no exceptions to the basic facts regarding gun control. It's like so many other historical lessons. They are facts. It's just like this, okay? Every communist revolution, every Marxist revolution, every heavy-duty socialist revolution in history has always produced the same results without exception. Facts. And that is, people were far worse off. They were starving, they were poor, they lived in a police state where people went missing, thrown in concentration camps, re-education camps, sent to psychiatric hospitals because they used psychology and psychiatry as a political weapon, and you were diagnosed as being crazy if you didn't agree with the official fake news rendition that the communist revolutionaries wanted you to believe. So if you look at every nation that had these giant communist revolutions, what you see is the same outplaying of events. Mass slaughter, all freedom taken away, no freedom of speech, no freedom of religion. The government controls everything. The people end up starving to death and are shot, murdered. The communist revolutions combined in the last 150 years wiped out, through starvation, through shooting, and other means, over 250 million people. It is a mathematical certainty with absolutely no deviation that a communist revolution always, and with no exceptions, produces the same types of tyranny and horror. Okay, that's a fact. Now, you will have people who do not know history or choose to ignore history, make up lies like, well, in the Scandinavian nations, which went socialist, we had prosperity. And that is a lie, because it ignores all the truths underneath it. That they had a heritage of capitalism. You revisit some of these Scandinavian nations, which are proof of how you can have prosperity and freedom with socialism. Come back to them in 5 years from now, after they've been totally overrun by militant Islamic extremists. There will be no prosperity. There will be no freedom. And see, people who know history know that, but they don't. They want to use social media and the mainstream media to condition, program, and brainwash you into not knowing that, so they can promote it as a desirable thing. And then let's look at the factual, historical, objective truth of gun control. And, you know, you have the mainstream media like CNN, a lying machine. You have the mainstream media lying. You have Google and Facebook manipulating the facts and lying. You have all this controlled information and propaganda. But the truth is, without exception, there is no historical exception to these historical facts. Every nation which has disarmed its own citizenry and confiscated the guns of its own citizens, in every single nation on planet Earth in the history of mankind, whenever a government began to take away the guns from its own citizens, it was very, very quickly after that nation became a dictatorial, totalitarian police state where the citizens were unable to defend themselves from the dictatorship which ran and had its power because they disarmed the citizens and they let loose their soldiers against their own people and massacred them and shot them, and the citizens could do nothing. That's what's called an authoritarian regime. And that is the motivation for gun control in America. The motivation for gun control in America has absolutely nothing to do with keeping students safe or reducing crime or protecting people from certain things. I mean, in some cases it does. It protects people from things. But the primary hidden agenda behind gun control is to use the shootings that you see on television, which are highly questionable, by the way, to use the emotion of fear that people have when they see students shot and other innocent people shot in these mass shootings, and use it as a mechanism, an emotional mechanism to drive people to demand that their politicians confiscate all guns, incrementally, of course. Now, because people have been scientifically dumbed down and they can no longer think rationally, they're unable to see the obvious contradictions in doing that, because the truth of the matter is that in every one of these mass shootings, had there been somebody there who was armed, either in working in the school system or you know, law enforcement at the school or whatever, if the innocent people had guns, the massacres wouldn't have occurred. And yet, if you were to mention that in the mainstream media, they would ridicule you and mock you and call you insane for saying that. But you see, that's just the dishonest manipulation of emotions, because it happens to be true. You look at how the media stories regarding this recent shooting, and the shooting before that, and the shooting before that, and as many shootings as you want to go back to, the fact that there's alternative media allows us to see truth, quotes, statements, and facts that would normally be totally hidden from us if we were just getting the news from the mainstream media. And there are so many glaringly obvious and disturbing contradictions in these official reports regarding all these shootings that they don't add up. The stories, the accounts aren't credible. The stories aren't credible. And it's not saying they're not credible because of emotionalism. It's not credible because there are actual people on record, on video, on radio, written statements who were at these shootings. Some of these people are law enforcement, some were other citizens who, through their own testimony of what they saw firsthand, totally contradicts the official story. Now, the mainstream media doesn't want you to hear that. That's why they want to kick InfoWars off of YouTube. But if you just look, I mean, there's so many facts that contradict themselves regarding these shootings, it's ridiculous. Let's just take the female teacher who opened the door to her classroom so students could pour in, and then I believe she locked the door and those students' lives were spared. But this teacher, who was one of the teachers at this school, she saw the gunman coming pretty close to her door. And her testimony, her public testimony was the gunman she saw, who was firing round after round at these students. First thing she said, he was carrying some kind of gun that she had never seen before. So that means this woman was acquainted with guns, and whatever gun type he was using was most likely not what the mainstream media is saying it was. Number two is, according to her testimony, the teacher, the gunman that she saw, who was firing round after round into the students, was wearing a face mask, body armor, and other things that made him look like he was a member of the police. You know, when the police are armed and dressed up like soldiers, it made him look like he was a policeman. But that contradicts the other stories, you see, because other stories say that the crazed student gunman shot people outside of the classroom, that he shot people before he went into the school. And all the people who saw him said that he was not wearing a face mask, camouflage outfit, body armor. You know, he was completely dressed with none of that military stuff on him. And the rifle he was supposedly carrying in a bag, and he had extra rounds of ammunition in a knapsack. Now everybody raises the question, if he was marching his way quickly into the school, why would he have killed some students outside of the school? Okay, if he was dressed in this full body armor, would he even stop, taking off all the body armor and everything, which would take him quite a bit of time, put it in his bag, and then just a number of, 20 feet later, put it back all on before he entered he was still on the outside of the school when this teacher saw him with body armor, face mask, etc. See, something doesn't add up. In addition, there's accounts of, just like there were in Vegas, multiple shooters. Multiple shooters. So that's just the beginning of the contradictions. And when it all adds up, you have so many contradictions in all of these major shootings. Remember in Vegas, multiple shooters. Bullets coming from different angles. Something doesn't add up. Something's being hidden from us. And there are very powerful forces that do not want you to have access to the truth. They don't want you to have truth and facts that are different than what they're feeding you, spoon-feeding you, because they want you to buy into their official version of reality. But suppose what is really happening in these situations is not what they claim it to be. And what would be the motivation for hiding what really happened? Well, I'm not sure what the motivation would be. But if the end game of the globalist elite is to disarm all the people on planet Earth and in America, and they control the media and everything else, then what occurs immediately before and after every one of these shootings? There is a massive onslaught of media bombardment about the need for gun control, confiscating guns, not selling guns, arresting people for guns. And so these events are a driving force to make guns illegal, to disarm citizens. And then the problem is you have irrational friends, people that you know that are dumbed down, and they don't get it. They don't get it. The kids in the school were disarmed. The people at the country music thing in Vegas were disarmed. The kids in Columbine were disarmed. That's why they all got slaughtered. So even one of the brothers of someone who got killed in Columbine, who he and his family have stayed out of the media spotlight for many years, he came forward today and he did not blame the shooting on guns. He blamed it on the fact that there were no guns in the hands of people to protect the students. So this is just one issue, you see, where the media has its own agenda, because the media by its very business structure, the media, mainstream media, by its very organizational structure, is not a communicator of truth, nor can it be a communicator of truth. The vast majority of the mainstream media cannot tell you the truth about anything. And you may really love and think these personalities have all this integrity. They can't tell you the truth because they are owned by the globalist elite that have a very clear set of agendas, and the news and the commentary and the facts that they present must agree 100% with the agendas and objectives set out by the globalist elite who totally own these media industries. And they want thought control, just like in George Orwell's novel 1984. Big Brother ran his dictatorship by controlling all the media, having thought police, using mind control, and using fear. Fear is the primary emotion to control and motivate people. That has been said by just about every dictatorship, every communist dictator, every dictator in the last 150 years has spoken out on fear being the primary motivator for people to give up all their rights and to open themselves up and to allow themselves to be ruled by a dictatorship. And they took it further than that. All of these totalitarian leaders said it is the fear of terrorism that is the primary motivator for people wanting to give up all their rights and to allow a police state to be set up in their nation. So, as people who are Christians, we need to be on high alert, because it would be extremely naive to look at reality in a way that is different from which the Bible presents reality to us. We must remember that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and the very reality of Jesus Christ coming to the earth, born of a virgin, who dies upon a cross for the sins of all mankind, and offers salvation freely to any man or woman who will believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ, who will believe Christ to forgive them of their sins and to make them born again. That message is a beautiful message. It's a loving message. It's the expression of God is love. But that message, make no mistake about it, and we must be educated in this area. Sloppy thinking will not cut it. As beautiful and freeing as that message is, that message is perceived as a direct threat to every police state, to every ideology or political philosophy that calls for totalitarianism and dictatorships through communism or national socialism or whatever. Every political philosophy, every political agenda, the entire movement towards totalitarian governments, the excuse for the need of more and more surveillance on the average citizen, the justification of taking away the right to bear arms from the average citizen. It's all predicated on a false belief system built on a lie. So the battle that is raging in America right now and in the rest of the world is a battle between the truth and a lie. When you boil it down to its essence, the spiritual battle raging in America today is a battle between the truth and a lie. And you can go down like almost a checklist on the side of lies and the truth. And that checklist, which involves the believing of lies or the believing of truths, will tell you how people will behave and act in just about any given situation. So, why America? And I've talked about this a great deal on the Paul McGuire Report. But you see, you have to keep this conversation alive. Most of you that I'm speaking to right now, you know what I'm saying is true because you know something about history. You read, you think. So you know what I'm saying is true. But many, many of your friends, as well as my friends and family and your family and children and grandchildren, are deceived by lies. They're captured by lies, and they believe lies because the truth has never been presented to them properly. Truth has been sealed off from them. So you and I, part of our job that God wants us to carry out faithfully is to keep circulating and communicating truth to people everywhere in our society and nation, and family and friends, and never think that the continuation of the circulation of truth is not important. Our discussing this today and your willingness to spread this message by going to paulmcguire.us is essential to keeping truth alive in the hearts and minds of people so that they can be set free. Because once again, we are battling. We're in the greatest spiritual warfare perhaps the world has ever seen. And it involves a battle between truth and lies. And that's why we must communicate the truth. And we cannot allow, I'm going to tell you something, if we allow our access to tell the truth to be stolen from us right in front of our faces by the globalist elite that own and attempt to control the world through Google and Facebook and social media and mainstream media, etc., then we're going to wake up one morning, as they will too, but they're too deceived to recognize it. We will wake up one morning and it will all be over, in the sense that truth will be under lock and key. It will be a criminal offense. It already is a criminal offense in many cases to speak the truth. But there will be a finality to it, that if you speak the truth or attempt to communicate the truth, you are imprisoned or sent away someplace. And don't be so naive as to think it can't happen here, because it is happening here. It's not happening here in terms of a future possibility. It's happening right here in terms of the fact that this coup, this totalitarian revolution is operating at full speed, even as we talk right now. So what you have to do and what I have to do is we must become educated. We must understand how to communicate these truths to the people that need them. We must do everything we can to keep the truth alive, to protect the light so that it continue to shine in the hearts of men. And we cannot afford the luxury of failing ourselves and failing God by being asleep at the wheel and allowing these freedoms to be stolen. Because if we allow these freedoms of communication to be stolen, we will live in great, great darkness. Now, look, I understand that in America you can use those words over and over, and people really don't get it. And the reason they don't get it is because they've never lived in a communist nation or a nation controlled by a dictatorship. But the people who have lived under those type of regimes, they know that what I'm saying is true, and we don't want to learn the hard way. It's a very, very critical issue in which we have a duty before God. See, I'm not just talking to you to be philosophical. I'm bringing up another truth. You and I, we have a duty before our God, the biblical God. We have a duty before God to stand for truth, to preserve the freedom to communicate. If we surrender at this time and at this phase in the battle, not only is that disobedience to the commands of the Lord Jesus Christ, but it is an act of utter selfishness, because we will bring down all hell upon our fellow citizens, upon people around the world, upon our children and grandchildren. That's how important the stakes are. And that's why it is vitally important for you to do everything you can to teach and educate others with wisdom and skill about the truth. Because you see, there's a very powerful momentum behind all this stuff that's going on. None of this stuff that you're seeing on television and social media and stuff, none of it is spontaneous. None of it is accidental. It is organized. It is orchestrated. They have an end game in mind. Now, I know most of you realize that, but many of the people we know and talk to don't realize that. We have to do everything in our power to spread the truth and communicate to people that there's an end game behind all of this. And the end game is the enslavement and captivity of every once free American and people all over the world. The end game is first a national dictatorship, like George Orwell's 1984, Big Brother. And the end game is a global dictatorship, also known as the New World Order, which is a one world government, one world religion, and one world economic system. You see, we have to educate people, and because they've been brainwashed, they've been programmed through mind control. They really believe, despite what the facts are telling them, that the mass media, which promotes this New World Order, this one world government, this one planet, one people stuff, they are deceived into believing that this is going to be a kind, benevolent, caring, loving world community in which everyone of any race, ethnicity, sexual identity, or whatever is going to be accepted and loved. There will be no injustice. There will be no poverty. It will be paradise on earth, run by, let's say, the United Nations and the globalists. Now, the problem with that is that's the expectation. That's what they're selling in the commercials and in the sub-themes behind the Olympics, etc. But the truth of the matter is that is not what the real game plan is. The real game plan is that the world's most powerful globalist elite will rule planet Earth with an iron fist through mind control, drugs, armed police. They will live like kings and queens economically, and the vast masses will not enjoy even a middle-class lifestyle. They will live in poverty. And you know, Steven Spielberg has a new movie coming out where I guess the kid or something in his movie, people, the whole earth is like a bad place to live, but everybody gets to escape in their own virtual reality. Is that what the elite have in mind for you and I and our children? That the conditions around us deteriorate, so the only place we can find solace is by living in some kind of virtual reality? That would be horrible. So we need to know what's going on. We need to know what is going on, and we need to know that we have a responsibility and a duty. And that duty is not to turn a blind eye and pretend it's not happening. The Bible says, love thy neighbor as you love yourself. If you truly are loving your neighbor as yourself, that means you will go to great lengths to educate and to awaken and to teach your neighbor what's happening, even if your neighbor is resistant. And that requires skill, but it can be done. You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. This is probably the most critical hour in America's history and one of the most critical hours in the world. And you and I were called by God to live for such a time as this. And we have a job to do from Jesus Christ. And we need to be busy about our Father's business. You can help us spread the word. You can help us educate other people that need to be educated. You can help us to get this message out. You can help us to win souls, make disciples of all nations, and bring in a last day's soul harvest. Visit paulmcguire.us, that's paulmcguire.us, and make a commitment to become a partner with this ministry by praying for me, my family, and this ministry as a prayer warrior, by seeking the face of the Lord, understanding the gravity of the hour, and then asking the Lord, God, what do you want me to do in terms of a financial donation or a financial contribution? And then ask the Lord what he wants you to do and obey him. Because in partnership and together, we can turn it around. None of us acting alone can turn it around. We have to operate as one. We need to stand together. That means partnership. Because, you see, our enemies are heavily organized and heavily financed. And they've picked up speed, if you've noticed, in the last couple of years. And this is not a time to freak out and go into a state of fear. because God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. And through the power of God and through the power of the Holy Spirit, we can still turn the tide of this enormous spiritual battle. And I'm asking you to join with me in doing it. By the way, our Roku channel is up now. We've added lots of hours of programming on it, and we're going to continue to grow it as fast as we can, and then we will have television programming using different internet platforms. So visit paulmcguire.us, that's paulmcguire.us, and you can connect to the Roku channel, which is at Paul McGuire Ministries. So when you go to Roku, you just type in the name Paul McGuire Ministries, and you'll see hours of programming put up there. And that is done because of those of you that have prayed and made contributions. So God bless and thank each and every one of you for joining us in that. We'll be back in just a second. You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report, and visit paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us. You are listening to the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. Jesus Christ said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." And knowledge is power. So people that are free and people that are powerful are people that are not victims, and they're also not captives or slaves. But the only way you can guard yourself from being a captive and a slave and a victim is to know the truth and to gain knowledge, because both of those things produce freedom. Now, I want to talk to you about something that perhaps many of you have heard of, and I'm certain that many of you have not heard of. And that is a secret operation. It's not secret any longer. But the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, launched a secret operation years ago called Operation Paperclip. Now, Operation Paperclip was when they brought in 10,000 Nazi rocket scientists, Nazi genetic scientists, and Nazi mind control scientists into the U.S. Then, after that was off and running, they carried out all kinds of secret operations. Another secret operation by the CIA was called Operation Mockingbird, where in Operation Mockingbird, the CIA infiltrated, controlled, and owned a massive amount of the mainstream media and the fringe media in the United States of America and around the world. And many people are unaware of that, or they think it's disappeared. But what you need to know is that there is collusion between the intelligence agencies, the globalist elite, and the media. And they are organized to bring in the agenda of a globalist elite, which is a world socialist government. Now, I want to read something to you about Operation Paperclip. Well, let's just talk about what happened at this CPAC meeting, which was a meeting of conservatives that happened a couple of days ago. And I believe President Trump spoke there. In fact, he did speak there. And there was a lady who was a well-known conservative writer and commentator for years. And she decided, in front of these thousands of conservatives, to just attack Donald Trump. And she was from a respected conservative publication called the National Review. And people couldn't understand how somebody from a respected conservative publication like National Review would attack the President of the United States. And her name was Mona Sharon, who was a senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. And after she attacked Trump, and I guess other people at CPAC for, I guess, the sexually abusing women or whatever, she was booed by large numbers of the crowd. But it's interesting that she chose to do this publicly at a conservative meeting. Now, I couldn't help but think about the history of certain media organizations like the National Review as examples of CIA fronts. In other words, the National Review, when it was established by the CIA for the purpose of pushing CIA propaganda and ideas. And to what degree they're still doing that, who really knows today? But we do know for sure that in the beginning, the National Review was financed and headed up by known intelligence agents working for the CIA, such as William F. Buckley. And William F. Buckley, who I admired highly when I was a kid, it turns out the whole time, when he had his own TV show and writing for the National Review, that William F. Buckley was a CIA agent, and that the National Review was founded by people like Buckley, William J. Casey of the CIA, and the CIA's plan with the National Review and other conservative publications and organizations was to set up a counterfeit conservative movement. And that kind of subversion has been going on a long time. The CIA and other intelligence agencies often will infiltrate a movement on the left or a movement on the right and use it to move the nation in the way that it wants it to move in. And so the National Review began as a CIA propaganda magazine. And that's a fact. I mean, if you debate it, basically, you're making yourself look very foolish because it's a fact. Also, here's what I want you to pay attention to. When William F. Buckley formed with William J. Casey the National Review, there was a guy named Howard Hunt who was part of that organization. Now remember, Hunt played an instrumental role in the Watergate scandal. So what we found out was that William F. Buckley, they outed him as a CIA operative, and he was outed by a former CIA agent, William Sloan Coffin, who was part of Skull and Bones, okay, the secret society. Coffin was a longtime colleague of George H.W. Bush, who was also a member of the secret society, Skull and Bones. And many of these people began their careers at Yale, which was a recruiting ground for Skull and Bones. So we must never forget that the CIA actively is shaping our culture, and many organizations and individuals who appear to be one thing are actually members of the CIA. For example, Dr. Timothy Leary, the Harvard professor who became the guru of LSD promotion, he was a CIA asset working for the CIA. In fact, the CIA bankrolled the spread of LSD in America. Now, other things to understand is that even in our time, these intelligence agencies and related agencies are behind a great deal of the major mainstream media and alternative media organizations. So, who was it that helped finance, and who knows how much they're financing today? Never forget that Google has been significantly financed by the CIA. Never forget that Facebook has been significantly financed by the CIA. Never forget that Jeff Bezos of Amazon has intelligence agency connections. You see, Microsoft had connections with the CIA. So all of these media engines, which control the thinking and the thoughts and the behavior of Americans, many of the most influential of them are secretly controlled and financed by the Central Intelligence Agency. And another example would be that the CIA had, again, what they called Operation Mockingbird. And they recruited thousands and thousands, at one time 3,000 journalists who were writers in the biggest newspapers in America. Time magazine was set up by the CIA. The Washington Post was set up by the CIA. And the New York Times was set up by the CIA. So, you know, when you see this movie, The Post, where they congratulate themselves for their journalistic integrity, it's totally crazy. Now, back to this journalist, Mona Sharon, who attacks Trump for his alleged, sexual attitudes towards women. Well, who is she? I'm not saying she's in the CIA. I'm simply saying she's a very questionable person that is working for a magazine, which at one time was significantly started and financed by the CIA. But when you look into her articles as a journalist and what kind of articles she does, you see a continual theme. For example, Mona Sharon wrote an article called The Conspiracy Mindset in January 26, 2018. And here she's kind of like, well, let me read you some quotes from her article. She talks about a conspiracy cancer. Bill Buckley, who had reigned as the de facto leader of American conservatism for decades, excommunicated the John Birch Society and the anti-Semites and other conspiracy mongers of the right. But in 2011, Donald Trump flamboyantly boosted the birther conspiracy about Barack Obama. In a Today Show appearance, he claimed to have a team of investigators working in Hawaii, stating they cannot believe what they're finding. Trump was rewarded by moving to top of the Republicans' list of preferred presidential candidates for 2012. Now, the point is, she mocks in this article as a conspiracy theory the CIA's alleged involvement in bringing drugs and automatic assault weapons into the ghettos of the U.S. to control them. And she in between the lines, she is essentially advocating the CIA, defending the CIA. And so to me, she's tipping her card. Now, does that prove that she's a member of the CIA or an asset of the CIA? No, but it certainly raises questions. And then she writes this. Now listen very carefully. This is a known conservative commentator who writes for the National Review. Remember, National Review founded by the CIA. This is the quote from Mona Sharon. Quote, "Conspiracy thinking is lazy, damaging, and weak. It undermines the already shaky confidence Americans place in its institutions. Trump revels in it. To see huge swaths of the Republican opinion elite following suit is acutely disappointing. Defend him if you choose, but don't become him." Okay, so who would write that? What is the mind and the mentality of a conservative author from the National Review who is essentially, and this is what we mean by mind control. I want you to listen very carefully. That paragraph and the other paragraphs she writes, you could say, okay, she's using techniques of persuasion. That is true. But she's also using techniques of mind control, because what she is saying very clearly in her article is that conspiracy theories, and what is a conspiracy theory? A conspiracy theory is anything that doesn't fit into the official dogma or programmed belief system of the elite, the globalist elite, and their intelligence agency allies. So for Donald Trump to question President Barack Obama's legitimacy by not having what he said was a valid birth certificate, social security number, and other things, which, by the way, happens to be true. You see, Mona Sharon is attacking Trump for promoting this birther conspiracy theory, yet the fact remains there's something very strange about President Barack Obama, and it has never changed. He does not have a valid social security number, and he does not have a birth certificate that's valid, among other things. And the social security number that he has is a number that belongs to some guy that lives in the East, that died, who lived in the East Coast. And we must remember that they never make a duplicate of a social security number. So it's impossible for one person to have the same social security number as somebody who's dead, because they never make duplicates of social security numbers. So how is it that Obama has no valid social security number and no valid birth certificate? And it has been alleged, by the way, and some people will dismiss this as a conspiracy theory, but it has been alleged that President Barack Obama was raised up by the CIA to be president. There are all kinds of glaring, missing periods of time in his biography that are very, very strange. For example, his mother was, by many experts, allegedly a CIA agent. Okay, that's pretty serious. And there were other people in Obama's life as a child that were in the CIA. So in a sense, he's like, if everything that they're saying is true, and let's not, the mainstream media continually covers it up because they're in the business of lying. Obama doesn't have a valid Social Security number. He doesn't have a valid birth certificate. So he's kind of a Manchurian candidate. He came from nowhere. You know, he was supposedly had all these great student positions at Yale. Nobody can remember seeing or knowing or meeting Obama at Yale at all. Nobody remembers seeing Obama or knowing Obama at Yale. It was as if he was never there, which in all likelihood, he never was there. And the same is true with President Obama at Columbia University. Nobody remembers seeing or meeting President Obama at Columbia University. I mean, this is Orwellian. It's like the thought police. It's like Brave New World, but it's manufactured reality. And manufactured reality is a lie. Let's read what else we see here. This Mona Sharon, of course, she pokes fun at the entire idea of conspiracy theories, because her job, obviously, if you read between the lines, is to insert into the mass public consciousness of America the lie that a conspiracy theory is like a mental aberration of paranoia, when in fact a conspiracy theory is not a mental aberration and paranoia. There are valid reasons for conspiracy theories, and the most valid reason is that many conspiracy theories arise because the official story is so filled with holes, or the official story is so lacking in truthfulness and credibility, that thinking people have to construct, based on facts and their own research, a conspiracy theory. Now, that doesn't mean everything that's out there that's called a conspiracy theory is valid. But look, neither is every news piece by the mainstream media truthful and valid. So she makes this career of defending the CIA and the official view on things. So, you know, is she a CIA agent? I have no idea. But she certainly writes her articles and does her attacks as if she was an asset of the CIA or some other group. And this is the type of thing that we need to understand. You see, when the CIA established Operation Mockingbird, which we talk a great deal about in our book, Trumpocalypse, and I also talk a great deal about these mind control operations like Operation Mockingbird in my book, Conquering the Matrix. And the goal is to deprogram people from the lies that they've been programmed with and tell them the truth, because the truth shall set you free. And this is the battle we're facing. Once again, it's a battle between the truth and the lie. And people must absolutely recognize that truth and lies are very, very spiritual. Let me give you an example biblically. Satan is the father of lies. Okay? The Bible tells us that. In contrast, Jesus Christ is the truth. Jesus Christ said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but through me. So the Bible says in numerous places that no lie is of the truth. Satan is the father of lies. The truth shall set you free. And that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. You see, there's that which is of the truth is that which is from God. That which is from a lie is that which is from Satan in its simplicity. And so when you read mainstream media or Google or Facebook or whatever, and they're constructing lies, then they have no, they're not connected to the truth. Okay? And this is very, very serious. This is how a nation is destroyed from within. So, something to think about it. This is Paul McGuire. You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. You are on one side or another regarding the most important battle in the history of mankind, a battle between truth and the lie. And you are either an active participant in promoting the truth, or you are an active participant in promoting the lie by either doing nothing, which allows the lie to continue, or by siding with the lie. There's no middle ground. You make a choice, and one day you will be responsible before Almighty God for being on the side of the truth or on the side of a lie. And that's important. Visit paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us. Check out the new Roku channel. Turn on your Roku and then type in Paul McGuire Ministries, and we have hours of exciting programming for you. We'll be back in a second. I'm Paul McGuire. This is Paul McGuire. Let's review some facts. Facts, of course, being synonymous with truth, regarding the influence of the Central Intelligence Agency on mainstream media in America. Now, from its inception, the CIA was involved in influencing major media in the United States to spin stories, to create stories that went along with the CIA's hidden agenda. I'll give you an example. There was, well, everybody listening knows of Carl Bernstein, one of the famous journalists who was involved in the Watergate expose of President Nixon, and he won a Pulitzer Prize for his journalistic efforts. So Carl Bernstein, among the mainstream media, is a very established journalist. In 1977, Carl Bernstein mentioned the CIA's Operation Mockingbird, and he basically reported that people like the head of the New York Times, Arthur Schulzberger, signed a secrecy agreement with the CIA, while other major media operations had more informal social ties to the CIA. According to Bernstein, the CIA operated a network of, by one estimate, 900 foreign journalists paid to spread propaganda anywhere in the world at any time, propaganda which two former agents claimed regularly found its way into U.S. media. So the CIA was in the business of creating fake news. In 1991, a now declassified CIA report noted the CIA's deep connections in the worlds of business, academia, the media, including relationships with reporters from every major wire service, newspapers, news weekly, and television network. The CIA boasted that they could place stories, literally create reality because of the power they had controlling, financing, and owning the media. Now, remember this. This was not some minor power. This was like total power, total control. The CIA, going back to the beginnings with Operation Mockingbird, and then as recently in 2014, Ken Silverstein a respected reporter, brought to the public the fact that one Los Angeles Times reporter habitually sent drafts and summaries of his stories to the CIA, assured the agency of positive coverage, and wrote stories that intentionally offered a positive slant toward the agency. The CIA also regularly invites reporters from the New York Times, Washington Post, Fox News, and NPR to CIA headquarters for personal briefings. That's pretty heavy. Now, Trump, who raised the whole issue of fake news, he ran into this CIA operation because there is a direct connection between the fake news generated by the mainstream media and what the CIA feeds the mainstream media. So let me just give you some facts that will open your eyes to the reality of the CIA and their control over the mass media, starting with Operation Mockingbird. Now, Operation Mockingbird grew out of the CIA's forerunner. The CIA used to be called the OSS, which was Office for Strategic Services, 1942 to 1947, during World War II. And the CIA had already established a global network of journalists and psychological warfare experts operating in Europe and influencing U.S. news coverage. Many people questioned the accuracy of the reporting when President Kennedy was assassinated. And CIA career officers, like the CIA director and the director of Central Intelligence, Richard Helms, was recruited out of the press corps by his own supervisor at the United States Press International's Berlin Bureau to join the CIA's new black propaganda program. Then there was a key player named Wisner, who used funds from the Marshall Plan to pay for the CIA's expansion into controlling the news media. And we read that the CIA not only influences publications, but it bankrolls them, including many of the social media and internet giants and search engines like Google and Facebook and many others have secret controls with the CIA. And they are controlling the reality. They're controlling the media agenda on behalf of the globalist elite. So that's just how all-pervasive this is. In addition, it's noted that really powerful U.S. news publications like Time and Newsweek both kept close ties with the CIA. And according to that famous journalist, Carl Bernstein, Alan Dulles, who, by the way, the first director of the CIA was Alan Dulles. He was personally handpicked by Rockefeller to be the head of the CIA. Now, you might ask yourself the question, why does Rockefeller have the right to pick the head of the CIA when Rockefeller is not a vice president or a senator or anything like that? He's just a very wealthy individual. Well, he's so wealthy, he's practically the head of the globalist elite, that he chooses anybody he wants to, and he can override the U.S. government. So Alan Dulles made it a point to be a good friend of Henry Luce, who was the founder of Time and Life magazines, which both were propaganda magazines for the CIA. So you see this all-pervasive propaganda being generated by the CIA through all kinds of journalistic outlets and infiltration of news media. And this is pretty heavy stuff because it continues on to this day. In fact, when the CIA was first beginning this program in the 1950s, they were actually training CIA agents at CIA headquarters to be journalists. So you were, in a sense, getting a journalism degree from the CIA, but to write in a particular way, fashion, and style. So what does all this mean? Well, it means that the CIA and other intelligence agencies control the mass media. And they also, going back to before 1999, the CIA helped establish companies like QTEL, a venture capital firm, and the CIA used that firm to identify and invest in companies that were developing cutting-edge information technologies that served the United States interests. So the CIA was investing big in corporations like Google and Facebook and all over Silicon Valley, as well as developing the GPS system and other technological developments. So what this means is that where we are right now is that the vast majority of the mass media, mainstream media, and even certain so-called alternative media are controlled secretly by the CIA, which means they're controlled by the globalist elites. If we, as average American citizens, allow YouTube, Facebook, and other social media giants to start kicking people off or censoring any information that they don't like this dangerous thing of YouTube kicking off InfoWars. Look, you don't have to be a big fan of InfoWars to recognize that if they're going to kick off InfoWars, they are going to next kick off something or some group that you like that's telling the truth. Also, the mainstream media, as it is now in the United States of America, has never been more corrupt, more dishonest. It has reached an all-time high. It is nothing less than a 24/7 propaganda machine. And we are given, each one of us, certain opportunities in history and in our own personal lives to make a difference. I heard a commentary that Matt Drudge, the founder of the Drudge Report, was making. He was talking with Alex Jones on InfoWars. This was recently. And I'm going to paraphrase him, not exactly, but he talked about the fact that every person needs to recognize when it is their time in life to stand up for what is right and to get engaged in turning the tide against evil. Because he said, tomorrow is not guaranteed to anyone. In other words, tomorrow is not guaranteed to you and I. There's no guarantee that you and I will wake up alive tomorrow. Tomorrow is not guaranteed to anyone, Drudge went on to say in a rather poetic way. And what he meant by that is the current freedom, or whatever degree of freedom we currently have in the United States regarding social media, the internet, media of all kinds, it is relatively still a free media environment. But what Drudge is trying to say, with the new laws that they're trying to pass, with YouTube threatening to kick off InfoWars from its YouTube service, that the freedom that we expect to be around tomorrow morning when we wake up, it could change overnight. All they have to do is pass one law, like that net neutrality regulation would have censored the vast majority of the internet. Thank God that the FCC commissioner voted it down, because it's a totalitarian measure. So we cannot preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. We cannot have a free nation unless we also have freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. And these things are tied directly into powerful technologies like the internet and social media. So we should not just naively expect that these freedoms are going to continue. These freedoms we're going to have to fight for in a legal, peaceful, law-abiding way. You need to expect that you're going to have to stand up for your rights to freedom of speech, your rights to freedom of access of truth on the internet and news media. There are powerful forces that are trying to take that from us now. If they succeed, we will move into a very, very dark world because there will be nobody to hold corrupt people accountable. So whatever you view as your purpose in life, to be a true Christian means that you side with truth. You side with the light. And if there are dark forces attempting to exterminate the truth and the light, then you must recognize that you must stand up for truth and the light. Because if you don't, the engines of totalitarianism, police state, and Orwellian world, Big Brother, they're waiting. They're hiding in the shadows. And the only thing that keeps them from fully coming out of the shadows and dominating our society, the only restraint that keeps them in check is we the people. When we the people are engaged, active, educated, stand up for what is right, vote for who is right, and are involved. And that's a serious commission because, if freedom is taken from us, and I pray that that will not happen, it's going to be a lot. The grief that you will experience will be far more than you realize because we have been blessed by God with an environment that largely allows the truth. If that truth were to be stolen from us, which is not the will of God, by the way, it would become very painful. And if not for you, for your children and grandchildren, it would become a very dark world. And I'm not saying that to be negative. I'm simply saying that to offer a sober analysis of what lies before us with the realistic optimism that if together in partnership we unite and stand up for what is right, we can turn the tide of this all-important spiritual battle. So I ask you to join with me in partnership through your prayers, through your contributions, donations, funneling these articles and the radio program around the internet censors. And together, if we spread the truth to enough people as fast as we can, by the Lord Jesus Christ's help, we can bring about some kind of great awakening, biblical great awakening in this nation, which will protect freedom and allow us to proclaim the gospel and make disciples of all nations. God bless you. I'm Paul McGuire. Visit paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us.